Solving part 3, this is now when we get into fractions. We looked before at this. This should make absolutely no sense unless you've seen this before, but really this is BEDMAS, but backwards. However, we can't do the B. So solving makes us do backwards BEDMAS. That's how you solve to find out what x is. But there's often a bunch of other things that are part of it, which is why we've had this x where we needed to move this right here. In case you've forgotten, that's where we had to move the smaller x. But we can't do that until after we've combined like terms. And then the very last lesson we did is we had to get rid of the brackets. So we first get rid of the brackets, then we combine like terms, then we move the smaller or more negative x, and then lastly we do this. Lastly, we end up doing BEDMAS. Now, however, we are looking at what happens if we've got the D, D, which is denominator. How do you get rid of denominators? And it's actually pretty straightforward. That's what we have to do first. Now, whenever you see a denominator, you want to get rid of that first. Then we go through this list. Get rid of any brackets. Get like terms. Move the smaller or more negative x, and then do backwards BEDMAS. There's only a few questions to do, so let's get started. Solve this. Well, first you see there's a 5 and a 3 in the denominator. We need to get rid of those. To do that, it's actually pretty straightforward. You need to get a common denominator. So our common denominator here is 15. So that's what we need to get on both of these. So I'm going to times this by 5. Remember, whatever you do at the bottom, you have to do to the top. Times this by 3. Times this by 3. And now you have 3 times 2 on the top, so that's a 6x over 15 is equal to 4 times 5, which is 20 over 15. Now you could do cross multiply. You could bring the 15 up over to the left and 15 up over to the right. You could do that, but that's not how I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you to get rid of them, because we got a common denominator. To get rid of them, you can just times on the numerator, because remember we're trying to get rid of denominators. Do the numerator and do a multiply, and make sure that what you multiply by on the numerator is the same as what's on what's the same on the numerator is the same as what's on the denominator. And I've put a 15 on the numerator, and I had to match it on the left and right, and now the numerator and denominator can cancel. The numerator and denominator can cancel on that side as well. So after you get rid of the denominator, that's step number 1, you need to do any brackets. Well, there are none. Combine any like terms on either side. There are none. Move the smaller x. Well, there is only one x. So at that point, it just becomes backwards BEDMAS. And that is, in fact, there's only one thing happening here. It's a times by 6, so I'll divide by 6 on both sides. So I'm left with an x on the left. On the right, I'm left with a 20 over 6. However, that can be reduced. They can both be divided by, I think, 2. So really not 20 over 6, but 10 over 3. So that's what we have to get rid of a fraction. So how do you get rid of the fraction? Well, step number 1, just as a recap here, was to get a common denominator. As soon as you had a common denominator, you could then multiply by 15 on the numerator, and those allowed you to cancel out. And now you were left with 6x equals 20. There's no fractions in there at all, and you could just do backwards BEDMAS. So keep that in mind. Get a denominator that's common, and then get rid of it. That's our plan. So let's do that here. Our common denominator between 4 and 5, 5, 10, 15, 20. To 20 would be a good number. that can be divided by 5 and be divided by 4. So this needs a 5, top and bottom, and this needs a 4. Now you notice that on the top, I put it in brackets when I multiplied it. And the reason is because the 4 has to go into all of these things. So on the bottom, let's deal with just our denominators here. Sorry, that zoomed up a little bit there. So on the bottoms, 4 times 5 is 20 on the right, and 4 times 5 is 20 on the left. On the tops, however, 4 times x, 4x, 4 times 3, negative 12. And then the right side, 5 times 2x is 10x, and 5 times 3 is a positive 15. So I multiply the top and bottom to get my common denominator. Now I can multiply on the numerator by 20. I don't bring the 20 in because my whole goal was if you put 20 up top on both sides, if you put 20 up top, the 20 on top can cancel with the 20 on bottom. The 20 on top can cancel with 20 on the bottom. So now that the bottoms are gone, what am I left with? 4x minus 12 is equal to 10x plus 15. So I need to get rid of some brackets. Well, there are none. I also need to get combine like terms. Is there any like terms on the right? No. Like terms on the left? No. There's nothing that are alike. So then you need to move, whenever you have more than one x, you need to move the smaller x over. So I see the 4 is smaller, so I'll minus it. 4 minus 4 is 0, so that's gone. But I got to minus it on this side as well. On the left-hand side, you're left with a negative 12. On the right side, you have 10 minus 4 is 6, and then a 15. Once you move the smaller x, it's just backwards BEDMAS. So I see a plus 15, so I'm going to minus it. So I got to do addition, subtraction stuff first, so that's gone. And so just the 6x is on the right. On the left, I've got a 12 and a 15, which is 27, but it happens to be negative. And then I can, lastly, it says 6 times x, so I will divide by 6 and divide by 6 to get the 6's gone. So now I have x is equal to negative 27 over 6. I think those can both be divided by something, not 2, maybe 3. Let's see. 27 divided by 3 is 9. 6 divided by 3 is 2, and it's negative. And there you have it. So how did we do that? If I'm zooming out here. Well, I got a common denominator of 4 times 5 is 20, so I got a common denominator on both, and that's why you see the common denominators are now both 20. After that, I multiplied by 20 on top and bottom, so that basically they just cancel. I couldn't forget, however, that I needed to, when I multiplied for a common denominator, I can't forget that this 4 had to multiply into both of those, and the 5 had to multiply into both of those. After that, there was no, and after that I'm right here, there's no common denominator anymore, there's no brackets, there's no like terms, I just have to move over the smaller x. So I do that right there, I minus it. And then after that, I've got a 15 that I minus over, and then divide by 6. So hopefully you can start to see a pattern here. And we've got one more which we'll do in the next video.